They would think your lifestyle is like a paradise. Water all the time, you get aircon, you get food, you have a nice bed to sleep. There's no disease, right? If you get sick, you go to see the doctor. They would consider that a paradise. But maybe to Elon Musk, your lifestyle is probably not as good. Industrialization is about changing from primary industry to secondary industry, right? So more factory, more people working in the factory, and as a result, we need a lot of other related facilities. So if you think of the factory worker, where do they live? Yeah, in houses near the factory, right? So if you want, like, as the factory owner, you want the worker to minimize the commuting time and to maximize the working hour, because productivity, you know how productivity is calculated. Yeah, over time. So to calculate the output, we have the average output per worker times the number of worker. So the more worker, obviously, the more output. And how do we increase the average output per worker? So it is by working longer, right? So if you force the worker to work like 10 hours a day or maybe even more, then you're exploiting the worker, right? So I mean, in more developed country, we have this labor law, like restricting the maximum numbers of working hour. So there's minimum wage and maximum working hour. Exploit the worker even if they want. You can't exploit them to work for, I'm not sure how long, but I think it's 14 hours per day in some countries. If you go to school for 14 hours a day, it's a lot, right? But if you go to work, you get paid, right? At least. So, but you have to factor in the working condition. So if it is physically intensive, so in the factory, chances are they have to like carry heavy objects. Some in some factory, maybe it's not for light industry, quite physically intensive. So if you force the, let's say if you have PE lesson for all 14 hours of your school, it's going to be horrible, right? Even if you get paid for it. So I mean, over a long time, the worker will become exhausted. So they have to rest, and that's one of the reasons behind the increasing adoption of automation and robotics in the factories, because the robot is not going to be tired, not going to be exhausted, not going to call in sick, not going to be lazy, and you just invest upfront and you have a robot that will help you work 24 hours a day, 4 days a week, no, 7 days a week actually. So, and then non-stop. So there's no such labor law regulating the use of automation and machine. So you can increase the productivity, because back to the equation, productivity is the average output per worker times the number of worker. So if, let's say, the robot is the same as the real human, they produce, let's say, 5 iPhone per hour, let's say, but the worker has to work, let's say, 14 hours a day, but the robot can work 24 hours a day. So comparatively speaking, even though the robot is expensive upfront, but you have to keep paying the worker every day. So, but if you buy the robot, you pay it upfront, then you don't have to spend any more money. Maybe you occasionally have to repair it, buy some new parts, but chances are over the long term, it is more cost efficient to have robot. Yeah, and it's more productive. So one of the reasons why many factories, or at least manufacturing, are changing to robots. Not for those like industry where it requires more precision. And then back to industrialization. So part of the reason is more factories. The factory worker have to live close to the factory, usually in the dormitory surrounding the factory. Yeah. So there was like, not sure if you recall, like a few years ago in China, the Foxconn producing Apple product, like there were a few worker like committed suicide jumping off the dormitory. Yeah, because of the exploitation, like long working hour, poor condition, not good pay, and no benefit. So yeah, and then it was just like, if you heard of the sweat factory, the factory worker put a small paper, like, or in the t-shirt or in the cloth, and then the consumer get it and get to see like save us, something like that. Yeah, and I think it could be the journalist who invent all this, but it could be the real thing. It's not that good as the working condition, like probably no air conditioning. That's why a lot of factory move to Southeast Asia when they to take advantage of the cheap labor and the labor willing to do this difficult work in bad condition. Because most Chinese workers, they no longer are willing to do that. Like they think, okay, they're more educated. They see that a lot more peers are working in the office or working in service sector with good or better working condition, and they compare themselves in a bad factory condition. They will say, you either give us higher pay or we quit. We don't do it. So when the factory can't hire enough worker, they can't produce efficiently, right? Productivity is going to decrease. But if the factory worker have to, the owner has to increase the pay, then the cost of production increase because it becomes more expensive to hire workers. So one way is to use robot. The other way is to relocate. Relocate to cheaper location like Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam. So sometimes if you see your clothes, it's no longer made in China. It's made in like Pakistan, Cambodia, Bangladesh, those kind of Southeast Asian country. Yeah. Have you noticed that? Yeah, Nike is a lot made in Cambodia and Vietnam. If you take a look, Nike. Yeah. Rural urban migration. So this one is about people moving from rural areas to urban areas because of the push factor and the pull factor. Have you heard about these two terms? Push factors are usually bad, like negatives. So imagine if you are standing, all of a sudden you get pushed by someone. What would be your reaction? It's bad, right? You probably like turn around and then yell at that one. And then the other one would be pull factor. If you pull someone, probably is attracting, like it's attractive, right? That's why you get pulled by someone. So we need both push factor and pull factor at the same time for migration to take place. Otherwise, there won't be migration because you can think of, let's say you live in a very bad condition like Sahara Desert. There's no water, no aircon, very hot, no food, but you don't have money and you don't know, like let's say you are uninformed about the world. Since you're born, you are in Sahara Desert. All you know is desert. So there's no alternative. So naturally, you would not consider migration because you don't even know there's alternative. So you have a lot of push factor. You want to go, but there's no place to go. So there won't be any migration. Same for only pull factor. If the place, let's say you want to go to another country with good education, good healthcare, high standard of living, a lot of good food, convenient transport. But if you compare that to Hong Kong, well, Hong Kong has everything, right? Convenient transport, good food, maybe not good education, maybe a bad air quality, but let's say it's the same, everything is the same, then naturally you would not migrate at all because it's the same. There's no different. Why order to move? Like, why make a fuss and then take all your stuff, go to another country and establish all new connections? So it's the same when there's no push factor, there's only benefit elsewhere, you are also unlikely to migrate. So we need to combine both push factor and the pull factor. Okay. Yeah. So rural urban would be one of the most common migration because rural people will be attracted by the prospect of going to urban and they compare their work situation in rural, usually agriculture, right? Work in the farm. And they will think, okay, work in the farm is quite tough. Like you have to go out under the sun every day. What if there's bad harvest, right? All of a sudden heavy rain or there's a typhoon destroying all the crops. You have no money left. So then you compare that to working in the urban. Let's say I just work in McDonald's, but I get air conditioning. I don't have to work under the sun. I get a regular pay every single day. If I work, I get paid, and I get to eat French fries for free. And so you compare that, I would say, it's okay. Let's migrate to urban. Like it's better to work as a McDonald's worker than as a farmer. So naturally, and if you compare that with like all the health benefits, like work benefit provided by McDonald's, and even for local urban people, you think McDonald's is bad, right? But if you step in the shoes of a rural farmers, they would probably think McDonald's worker is very good because it's about the anchor point. What is the comparison point that you have, right? So, I mean, if you compare your lifestyle to someone that is like Elon Musk, right? You probably consider like Elon Musk's lifestyle is very good. Like right now, your lifestyle is not as good. But if someone from Africa is comparing your lifestyle to his or her lifestyle, they would think your lifestyle is like a paradise, right? You get water all the time, you get aircon, you get food, you have a nice bed to sleep, and yeah, there's no disease, right? If you get sick, you go to see the doctor. So they would consider that a paradise. But maybe to Elon Musk, your lifestyle is probably not as good. It's about comparison. So there's no perfect lifestyle. I mean, it's about being grateful, right? We always want to improve, but we can't forget about like there are always people worse off. So, but not to say we have to be lazy and do nothing and be satisfied with the current lifestyle. Anyway, so it's like study, right? If you compare to the top students, your study, or maybe you say I'm the top student. So that could be the case. Yeah. So, but there are always someone better. Yeah. So the world is quite big. High urban birth rate. So this is about people giving birth in urban areas. So it's not that the rate is higher than rural. So it's not higher, but high. So compared to rural birth rate should be higher because of traditional mindset. They think that in order to increase farm productivity, let's give birth to more so that the children can help out in the farm. But in urban, there's no necessity to give birth to more because the employment sector is not that physical intensive. And most of the time, parents in urban areas, they send children to school. So like you, so you are still dependent until around 21, 22 years old before you are economically active to make a living, to support yourself. So until then, you are still considered dependent on your parents. So young dependent. So, but right here we talk about high urban birth rate as in the number of people in urban is much larger than rural. So naturally, if we have the same birth rate, more people in urban means there's more live birth, right? Because birth rate is the calculation of the number of live birth per 1,000 in a given year. So the more people, like the group that are willing to give birth is bigger, then naturally more live birth is going to be born. Influx of international migrant. So this one is attraction. So naturally, if you are migrating, you're not going to go to rural area, right? So yeah, so if you go to UK, let's say for university, you're not going to go to the rural countryside, right? So usually urban as well. So the migrant from other place, from overseas, are going to the urban areas, not the rural. And as a result, we get net increase in urban, but not rural.